and an anything Ipsum generator, weird and fun advocate, creative designer and developer, Neopets fan, mechanical keyboard nerd, singer, has a SoundCloud, and overall web hacker. Give it up for Sophie talking about building personal websites that are weird and awesome.
Thank you. Woo! Thank you very much. I hope you've all had a wonderful day. I have had my mind blown so many times by all of the talks. And this is the second time that I've followed Hayden, and always a very tough act to follow, but I hope I can do it justice. So I'm here to talk to you today about a topic that is really close to my heart, and that is the personal website. I kind of don't need to do this, because Adam just did it, but like I'm Sophie. I'm based in London. I work at a bank, but a cool bank, not a regular bank. And I have a website, localghost.dev. You can find me on Mastodon occasionally, and I have a kind of business card thingy at sophie.omd.lol. So let's get onto it. If you take one thing away from this talk today, I want you to build your own website. Now, I don't mean that website that everyone has, that we've all built at some point in our careers, that has the sections and the calls to actions and that feature grid with 3 columns. I mean a space that is entirely yours, a reflection of yourself, of your own personality in HTML and CSS, and maybe just a tiny little bit of JavaScript. And it might be like this, a kind of portfolio with accomplishments and things that you've done. Or it could be something really weird and really pointless, even better. That is the best kind of internet. But ultimately, it is your space, and you can do with it whatever you want. And in the early days of the web, there were a lot of websites like this. People would build websites for their families, for bands they liked, or just a homepage. Ultimately, they did it because it was fun. And it was a great way to connect with like-minded people. But it just seems like this has been lost somewhere. It feels like we've lost this decades-old art form, right? This individuality of design, the uniqueness of the content on these sites, this kind of habit of experimenting with HTML and CSS just to see what happens. The beauty of a website built by a person just because they wanted to. So I want to have a look at how we use the web today. Most of us in this room get paid to build websites. And a lot of those websites are probably very similar. So they might be marketing websites or e-commerce of some description. Ultimately, they're going to be websites designed to make money, whether that's through selling something or advertising some kind of service. And you know, we've all had to do stuff like put tracking pixels on our websites, or do some kind of A/B testing to see what kind of button performs better, or do something with Google Tag Manager. Still don't really know what that is, but I've put it in a few websites. And ultimately, these sites all look kind of identical, right? And you've got the same kind of icons, the same kind of hero images, the same calls to action, the same illustrations. Even the content is really similar. So like when a previous company I worked at, I wrote a blog post that I was very proud of, and my marketing person asked me to change the title of it so that it would do better in SEO. And of course, she was right, but ultimately, it just felt like I'd kind of had that creative control taken away a little bit. Ultimately, these sites that we're building are a service. They're doing something transactional. And that kind of website has always been there since the very beginning, but it really feels like that's the dominant kind of website now. So I guess I'm asking, where did the fun web go? And for newcomers who want to get into web development, it's really hard to learn if you don't know where to look. I Googled how to build your own website, and this is what came up, a list of things like conduct competitive research, explore visual options, define your goal. Like, what if your goal is to build a website? I mean, and if you do get into web development now, chances are you're doing it to make a career out of it. You might do a boot camp, some kind of course, some kind of professional training. And I mean, not all courses are like Vasilis's course. Like, right, there's so many ones that just jump to whatever people are hiring for. So you want to learn React straight away, of course, because that's where all the jobs are. You skip the basics. And I'm not saying don't use frameworks. Like, I do that every day in my job, but you need that knowledge of foundational HTML and CSS so that you can build accessible websites, performant websites. And the websites that we use for fun are also businesses. So think about the websites that you go on the most today. Chances are it's a set of a few websites owned by just a few companies. And I think, you know, these days the web is pretty much well and truly centralized. And under the guise of a free service, these sites are making money from data that they're harvesting from us, and whether that's through personalized advertising or selling your data to a third party. And of course, they've got running costs, but at the end of the day, they are businesses, and they exist for the purpose of making money. I'm more of a Reddit user than I would like to admit, and there's a lot of kind of grumbling going on over there at the moment because they've just announced huge charges for API usage. So all the third-party clients are like, we can't afford this. And they can just decide, you know what, we're going to charge people loads of money to use our API. And social media is the biggest offender of all, right? So we write posts, we upload videos, we share images on these centralized platforms, and some of us even conduct business on these platforms. And it's a cliche, but it's a cliche for a reason, that we are the product, right? So because they use our data. And we do still own that data. If you dig into their terms of service, they're very much like, oh, it's your data, you own it. But they can reproduce it, they can copy it, they can distribute it royalty-free. They can do whatever they want with it, even if it's our data. And they can and do make money off us. And I feel like we've come a long way from the days when we were the creators and we owned our own content. And when it comes to that content, you end up moderating yourself and you aim to please your audience. I was a huge Twitter user until last year, and I got kind of addicted to those dopamine hits of the follows and the likes, and you start thinking, what can I post that people are going to respond positively to? And it's the same way that you get these YouTube videos with the identical thumbnails or the tweets with the same kind of thread pattern. It's about creating content with the hope that it will become viral so that you can monetize it. And that character limit that gets imposed on sites like Twitter makes you kind of preempt backlash when you post something. You start to think, how can someone twist what I'm going to say? And you end up kind of preempting it with some defensive position that is kind of ridiculous and unnecessary. And it turns out that there's no reply guys on your own website, and it's all about putting things out on the internet for yourself. And I mean, you can replace Twitter here with any social network pretty much. It's all the same, isn't it? Well, having a social media account is basically the lowest friction way to having an online presence these days, and it doesn't need any tech knowledge, it doesn't need any money, and you've got this kind of captive audience. But if someone comes onto your page and doesn't have an account, they can't see a lot of your presence there. So I don't have a Facebook account, and it's happened quite a lot that I've Googled a restaurant or something, and I've gone to their page only to find that it's a Facebook page, and I actually can't see half of the stuff on the page because it's asking me to log in. Now, it's not all bad. I've just gone on a rant about social media, classic, but I mean, anyone in this room will tell you that social media is fantastic for staying in touch. We're all tweeting and tooting along with, I still can't get used to that verb, with the conference, using the hashtag, fantastic. It's great for breaking the ice, it's great for kind of communicating, but we have to recognize that it comes at a cost, right? The cost of the loss of our creative freedom and our data kind of beholden to somebody else's platform. And this content stays on one platform. If you break a rule, if you get banned, you might lose access to that content. And you can't speak to anyone to dispute it if you think that it's unfair. And the interactions that you have with people on the website are not transferable. So when I left Twitter, I had to export my data. It took ages. I was really paranoid that it actually wouldn't ever come. But of course, it's got all of my tweets, but it hasn't got any of my interactions with other people. So all those conversations I had, they'll be on Twitter forever. And then, of course, sometimes these sites just die. So MySpace very famously lost 12 years worth of data in 2019. And that data is gone. That is not coming back. And no one can back that up. Now, it wasn't supposed to be like this. With the World Wide Web, when it was built, the idea was that it was meant to be decentralized. And it was actually released as an open standard to democratize access. And birthday boy Tim Berners-Lee gave an interview in Vanity Fair in 2018, where he said it was all based on there being no central authority that you had to go to ask permission. The spirit there was very decentralized. The individual was incredibly empowered. And that feeling of individual control, that empowerment, is something we've lost. And I think as social media fragments, I think it's the perfect time for the personal website to have a renaissance. So first, I want to have a look at what happened. So why aren't we building websites for ourselves anymore? The tools are the same. It's no more difficult than it ever was. There's still plenty of free web hosting. It's just like people aren't doing it. And I think somewhere along the way, websites stopped being about the creators and started being about the consumers. And we don't build websites for ourselves like we used to. We build them for the audiences that we want or that we think we need. And I see the personal site as a kind of antidote to the centralized web. You know, it's probably hosted on someone else's computer, but ultimately it's a piece of the web that belongs to you as the creator. And if that host goes down, you can just move it somewhere else. And it's not going to fix democracy or topple the kind of giants of online capitalism, but I think it is a radical act in itself. And it says, you know, I want to carve my own space away from these big corporations. So I'm going to have a look now at a bit of a history of the personal site on the web and how it's changed over the years. But I want to take a minute to acknowledge my privilege in this space, because I grew up with computers in the house from a very young age. We had the internet in some form from the early 90s. And I know that my experience is very much not universal. But I've seen the World Wide Web change so much in the last 30 years, and I really want to share that with you. So I'm going to share a bit of my own journey along the way as well. So we're going to take a trip through cyberspace back to the early 90s. That's me. That's a photo of me. OK, so from the very first web page in 1991, you know, right at the beginning, it wasn't a very, I mean, it was literally like CERN, basically. But by 1994, people had started to build their own websites. And it was very much a kind of academia thing. So universities had access to the World Wide Web. And so all these websites would spin up on university servers. And gradually, public internet service providers followed. And they provided hosting of like one single static page, so the general public could start to have their own pages. And a lot of stuff looked a bit like this. And then suddenly we get these free web hosts, GeoCities, Tripod, AngelFire, these kind of familiar names to some of you, I'm sure. But these sites offered free web hosting for the masses. And GeoCities was a particularly interesting one to me, because it offered neighborhoods, which were like these kind of collections of similar websites. So for example, there was like an Area 51 that was for sci-fi themed websites, and there was like, I think, Heartlands, which was for like family websites. And I think it was, for one thing, it was a great way to see sites that were similar to yours, but it provided this mapping of the real world to a virtual one. And if you think about, at the time, the internet was really unfamiliar for a lot of people. So this mapping provided a familiar analogy to what was really a brand new audience to the World Wide Web. And it provided a sense of small-town community through these link directories in these neighborhoods. And they had a drag-and-drop builder that I used a lot. They had these pre-made themes. You didn't even need to learn HTML. But most importantly, it was free. So more and more personal sites started to be built. And a lot of them were like this. There were these family pages with photos. I find it really interesting that they just put pictures of their grandchildren on this web page, because now people would feel really weird about doing that, quite rightly. You know, online privacy was much less of a concern because you just assumed no one was going to find your website. You know, search engines weren't really a thing at this point, and the audience was a lot smaller, and sites were a lot harder to find. People also made collections of graphics that they would share for you to put on your website. So it's just a site that exists to store their favorite backgrounds and buttons and all sorts of things. People had fan sites using Hayden's favorite frame sets. This is a Final Fantasy fan site, and it's got a marquee element mid-scroll there. It's an action shot. People would build sites for their hobbies. We've got a great astronomy website there with some web rings, classic web relics there as well. In the late 90s, I played a lot of a video game called Pets, with a Z, because it was the 90s. And it was a virtual dog game, basically. And I used to go on the internet and download custom content for this game. So custom breeds, modded content, that kind of thing. And I thought this site was the coolest thing I'd ever seen, and it blew my tiny little mind. And I just knew I wanted to do something like this. I wanted to learn how to build a page on the internet. And at school, you know, I'd played around with front page and stuff, but it wasn't until I got this book that, like, my world changed. This is Make Your Own Web Page, a guide for kids. I think it was released in 1999. It taught me how to handwrite HTML in Notepad, in capitals. It taught me how to build layouts using tables. I absolutely loved it, and I started experimenting. And while researching this talk, I was delighted to find that the book is available in its entirety on archive.org. So you can check out there's not a CSS, no CSS here. It is entirely HTML and some attributes that would not be very welcome today. So while I was just getting to grips with static website, there was a different kind of web brewing altogether. And this was a shift from read-only websites to this focus on participation and user-generated content. And this would later become known as Web 2.0. And this is where we would start to see the web becoming more social. There's a lot more interactivity. There's this shift from a creator-focused website to a consumer-focused starting to take place. And people began to see the web as a platform where they could make money from their users. But I think there was one upside to this, and that is that the web suddenly became customizable. And these sites that you could register with and sign up with, you could customize them to make them your own. And through that, many people started learning basic web development skills. And for me, that catalyst was Neopets. So Neopets was a virtual pet website. You could customize your profile page, your shop page, your guild page with HTML and a bit of CSS, I think, full of auto-playing MIDI files and tiled backgrounds and jazzy fonts. But for me, this was where I really got my start. And I built a GeoCities website for my Neopets guild, and I started making graphics to share, and ultimately, people were much more likely to join your guild or come to your shop if you made it look cool. So there was this real impetus to learn HTML and CSS. Even Neopets had guides on their website on how to use HTML, and there were all these fan sites that had shop layouts that you could just copy and paste into your shop. And a lot of web developers that I've met over the years have told me that their first experience of web development was also on Neopets. It was this real cultural phenomenon. And I think it was really important in teaching a lot of young people the basics of HTML. And I really can't think of an analogy to that in the world today. And so as the user-generated web grew, so did the blog. The blog has been around forever, right? So it had its roots in static sites back in the 90s, where people would just upload documents of their daily goings-on. But then in the early noughties, we start to see the blogging software come along. So we've got things like B2, Grey Matter, Movable Type, and later, of course, WordPress. And then some hosted platforms as well, like LiveJournal, Blogger, Open Diary, that kind of thing. And in the early 2000s, my friends and I had blogs. This was one of mine. I was a big Red Hot Chili Peppers fan, because that was the cool thing. And we'd have lots of links and personality quizzes, and they were all built with tables and frames, and it was just, nightmare. And then gradually, as I got older, I fell into this community of personal site creators, where it's honestly bizarre that I think back at it, but domain names were this kind of status symbol. So if you had a domain name, you were automatically cool. I was never allowed one. My parents wouldn't let me. But things like lovexguns.org or definitemaybe.org or .net or things like that. It was a strange time. But if you had a domain name and you were cool, you would host other people. So you'd kind of get this this air of exclusivity of hosting people on your cool domain name. So it's a real privilege. But the nice thing was that there was this real emphasis on community and helping other people learn HTML. I forgot there was a swear word on there, sorry. We'd all link to each other's websites, people who we'd never even met, but we were friends because we commented on each other's blogs. And the vibe was very much like, this is my space, but here's something for you. And of course, being mostly teenagers, we'd change our website names every so often. So people would change their domain name all the time. Sites would move around a lot, which means they're mostly gone now, and they're also impossible to find on the Internet Archive, which was quite sad for me. But there is a conference talk from JSConf EU in 2017 by Rachel White called Keep the Internet Weird, which goes into a lot more detail about this kind of internet subculture. And this is her site in 2003. And a lot of these websites were run by women and girls because it was a real safe haven for marginalized people. You could be yourself, or you could adopt an alias if you wanted. There were no real name policies. And it was a small and controlled, like-minded audience. And yeah, I think it was something really interesting. And when social media got big a few years later, everything really started to change. Now, social media has been around in various forms since the late 90s, really, with things like LiveJournal and Blogger. They totally count as social media, but also, of course, things like Friendster, Friends Reunited, those kind of things. And these were websites where you could make friends with people, you could chat to each other, you could post content for your friends to see. But it was MySpace that really set the world on fire. And it was launched in 2003, but by 2004, it had 5 million users. And I think a really big reason for its kind of explosion was because, for one thing, internet access in people's homes was becoming a lot more widespread. But this was a product that merged socializing with music, which is kind of catnip for young people, like two things that young people absolutely loved. So, of course, I had one, my friends had one, everyone at my school had one. And I think what's really interesting is that I used to be seen as a nerd for making websites. And people really didn't have the internet much or use the computer much at my school, so it was kind of a sad thing to do. But MySpace suddenly made it cool to have an online presence, and it was even cooler if you could make it look good with CSS. And when I tell normal people what I do for a living now, a lot of them do tell me that they kind of remember learning some CSS from MySpace. So it's kind of like the kind of normal people's Neopets, which I really enjoy, with a lot more people. So now there's no longer a need to have your own website, right? Everything is there on MySpace. You've got your profile page, which replaces your About Me page. You've got your top 8, which replaces your links page. Blog posts now are bulletins or status updates. And of course, we see this centralization starting to take place all of a sudden. And then came Facebook. Now, Facebook didn't allow customization at all, which meant that everyone's page just looked like Facebook. And I used to love Facebook. I was on there for a long time, and I loved that I could interact with my offline friends online in new ways. And we'd upload albums full of terrible photos from nights out, and post in-jokes in the comments. And when I went to university, it was an absolute lifeline for joining groups and meeting people. And there was that weird period of time where if you weren't on Facebook, you didn't get invited to any events because all of the events were on Facebook. But as Facebook got bigger, and of course Twitter came along as well, people really stopped engaging with personal websites and blogs so much. And by 2010, I was no longer building websites for fun. I was building these massively over-engineered, terrible WordPress websites for university societies. I had a LiveJournal for a while. I gave up with that. I just felt like there was no point having a personal blog at all, because everything was on Facebook, everything was on Twitter, everything was on Instagram. And I didn't know anyone who still had a personal website at this point. And of course, people starting to get the internet on their mobile phones as well. The iPhone came out in 2008, and in all the following years as well, you had to make your website look good on a mobile. And at the time, that was pretty hard. I didn't know what I was doing. So it just seemed like a whole load of complexity. And the blogs that were left went from being kind of daily goings-on or just updating for fun to being targeted towards a specific audience. A blogger is all of a sudden an occupation. And those popular blogs became full of ads and sponsored content. This real shift from doing it for the sake of doing it to make a living. And what once was for the writer's own benefit is now focused on the people reading the blogs. I was really into makeup at the time. I wanted to become a makeup blogger because I thought I'd get loads of free samples. I didn't. But I was too lazy and my photography skills suck. But for me, this was a real example of a blog that was designed for the reader, not the writer. Because I hated doing this, I did not get any joy out of posting. It was really tedious. I had to take all these pictures of makeup products and makeup looks, and then make sure the title was SEO'd enough, which I didn't know anything about. And so I gave up with that. In 2014, I started a food blog. It maybe lasted 6 months. That photo is so terrible, and I really apologize. But it lasted maybe 6 months before I got bored, because as a creator, the web for me had become about engagement. And if I wasn't getting any engagement, what was the point? And I felt like I'd never be able to compete with all the lifestyle bloggers who had these fancy, expensive DSLRs. And I just thought, there's no point having this website if I can't make it look like a glossy magazine. But that minestrone soup is so good, so if you do want the recipe, come and find me afterwards. So at this point, if you are building a website, you're probably doing it You need to sell something, or you want to get something. You'll probably use a pre-made WordPress theme, or you'll buy one, get someone to make one for you. You'll use the hot new web framework Bootstrap, which made mobile-friendly websites look super easy, but also make all the websites look the same. And nowadays, you get all these website builders sponsoring podcasts, or my favorite YouTube channel that does the restorations of all the paintings. I love that. And Squarespace is like bringing back those WYSIWYG builder vibes, right, from GeoCities. But it's considerably more expensive, and all the sites are very similar looking. And if you need a website for your business, it makes sense to just make a Squarespace, but they're really not designed for personal sites unless you want to monetize them. And I do wonder, if I hadn't become a web developer and fallen in with a crowd of people who have their own website and who inspired me to make my own, whether I'd ever have bothered making my own website again. And that makes me really sad, and I want to change that. And I'm not the only one. Now, I'm obviously very nostalgic for the old web. Talk about it at length. I have very fond memories. But I think there's room for both the old web and the web of today to coexist. Websites do not need to look like GeoCities to be good. But I think we can take some principles from those days, like anything goes, be creative, experiment, and apply it to the sites we build today. And most importantly, we have a much better knowledge of things like accessibility than we did back then. All right, let's look at some cool websites. Here are some people who are bringing back the magic of the old web, of the personal website. I'm going to just give you a motion warning. There's going to be some videos of me scrolling around various websites. This website belongs to someone called Cassie. She is an incredible SVG artist, and she's got an absolutely wonderful website which has fun effects as you move the mouse. She's got some cool dark and light themes, and even more goodness as you scroll as well. This is Lynn Fisher's website. Well, it was about 2 years ago, I think, but I just love this so much that I've kept this one in. Amazing things happen when you resize the screen. And she's still got this site up on her, in her archive on her website as well. This is Alistair Shepherd's website. It's inspired by the video game Firewatch, and it changes color depending on the time of day. And he used generative SVG to create the mountains as well. He did a fantastic talk at State of the Browser last year about how he built it. This is David Danz's website. I've included this because it's really just chill. It's really nice and minimalist. He wrote about how he used the P3 color space to make it more bright, which is very exciting. And you couldn't see that because of this screen. But you could, I especially love this website because it's got a really stupid feature when you click the little loudspeaker icon next to his name. It's just him saying his name in a really silly voice. But it just sums up the personal web for me. This is Cara Brightwell's blog. I just think it's so beautiful. It's this lovely minimalist design that is still beautifully colorful. It resizes with the browser as well, so because of course CSS grid magic, and it just shows you that minimalist doesn't have to mean a white background. This is Sarah's website. I just really enjoy the scroll effect on the little tabs at the top, and also she's got an entire section dedicated to ASCII art. From her Usenet days, and that just gives me endless joy. There's even a self-portrait ASCII art as well. This is my colleague Carol's website. Another minimalist one with lovely colors, but I've included this because she's got an entire page dedicated to her keyboards and her work setup, which is just like, if you can't post about your keyboard collection on your website, what can you do? And inspired me to do the same as well. So I'll say it again, in the world of social media and websites for profit and not fun, I think building your own website is radical. That space on the internet that's entirely yours. And I'm not saying ditch social media. You don't have to stop building websites for business. We've all got to make a living somehow. But I think those things can live happily alongside each other. This is my website. It was originally a blog and just a talk portfolio, but I wanted to do something a bit more creative, so I built 6 themes. I was between jobs at the time, to be clear. But yeah, there's a theme switcher, and one of them harks back to GeoCities. See if you can guess the one that does that. But I wanted to make sure that it was accessible as well. So it loads normally without JavaScript. You just get the first theme. And I wanted to respect reduced motion preferences as well, so the GIFs won't play if you have reduced motion enabled, because I think you can and should have a creator-focused website that's still considerate towards the people who are visiting it. So I've used custom properties to control how different things are displayed. So each of those themes will have different settings for all of those. I've set some kind of defaults there. But then on the theme switcher, it sets an attribute on the body element. And so then I can just switch up the variables depending on the value of that. But maybe I feel like after today, I should try out has or something and see if I can do that differently as well. Now, I don't want to be prescriptive about what you put on your website, right? It's your website. You can put on there whatever you want. You might make it an absolutely massive, maximalist extravaganza, or you might have plain text on a white background. You might spend hours handcrafting your HTML, or you could use a drag-and-drop builder. There's still plenty out there. You might host it on someone else's platform or have a box running in your bedroom. It doesn't matter. All of these things are valid as long as you do it for you. You know, you don't need to think about SEO. You don't need to think about web design trends unless you want to. You don't even have to use a framework, but again, you can if you want, but don't do that. You might want to list recipes that you like. You might start a blog. You might write about tech, share pictures. You could build like an Instagram for yourself. You could post short status updates like your own version of Twitter. The possibilities are endless. You might even build something completely pointless. This is my favorite genre of website in the entire world, useless websites. Websites that have one joke, and that's the entire joke, and it's the entire website. I have a huge amount of respect for anyone who builds a website like that, because you're building something just because and putting it on the web for people to get joy from. Your space is an opportunity for you to be as weird as you want, to experiment and to learn at the same time. You know, use whatever web APIs you want, whichever new features of CSS without worrying about whether your customers' browsers support it. You could go to MDN and find the weirdest sounding API and just play around with it to see what it does. You can play with view transitions. I don't even know how to use them, but I think that's just an amazing thing. You can try out the things behind experimental flags, experiment in production, write bad code, ship it. Just, if you screw it up, you just revert it. If it's, your website will probably deploy in about 30 seconds. Ultimately, a good personal website shouldn't take itself too seriously. And if you build the basics of your site in normal HTML, the content will show up regardless of the weird stuff that you put on top. And that's known as progressive enhancement. So the basics of your content are there for everyone, and then the kind of weird stuff is there for you and whoever else has the same experimental flag turned on in Chrome Canary. And the tools are still the same as they ever were, right? HTML and CSS. And it's still totally possible to write some HTML, stick it on a server, and have a fully functional static web page. And it's really easy now to get bogged down in all these frameworks and build tools. You don't need React or Webpack or whatever the latest pack is. Like, you can use them if you want, but it's not a must-have or a must-learn for your personal site. And if someone comes up to you and asks you, I want to build a website, what should I use? Resist the temptation to send them to the latest, greatest framework, because chances are it's just not what they need. Right? Learning HTML might put someone on the track to becoming a web developer, or they might just have a website that they update occasionally and that's it, and maybe that's fine for them. Neither outcome is better or worse. So start with the simplest possible tutorials and tips. And hosting doesn't even have to cost you anything. Storage is so ridiculously cheap now that free hosting is better than it's ever been. This is my favorite. It's called NeoCities. It's a free open-source static site host that's aimed at anybody who wants to build a website. They've got HTML tutorials. They've got all sorts of things. There's even a kind of community aspect as well. And a lot of websites hosted on here have like these kind of 90s and 2000s style themes. But I'm hosted on here. I give them a little bit of money every month. And they let me make a stupid number of websites for pointless things, and then also use my own domain name with it as well. And they've got this quote on their website I really like. It's time we took back our personalities from these sterilized, lifeless, monetized, data mined, monitored addiction machines and let our creativity flourish again. On the subject of like old web magic, I'm like obsessed with omg.lol, which is this kind of service that brings back some of that magic. So it's a service that offers like a landing page. It has email forwarding, so you can have your @omg.lol address, and various other things like a paste bin, paste.lol. I don't know. It just entertains me so much. But they're working on like an Instagram-style site as well. They have a Now page service, which means Now page is like the most personal website thing I can think of, because it's literally just a list of things that you're doing at this point in time. You might use it to say, this is what I'm currently reading, a bit like Hida's log pages as well. This is what I'm currently watching. These are the games I'm currently playing. And Rob Knight has entirely automated his Now page. So it pulls from like Last.fm and like PlayStation Network and things like that. And it really is a sight to behold. But it's the most personal thing I can think of because it's all about you. And for those of you with fond memories of web rings, Sarah Joy, whose website I showed earlier, has created a CSS lovers web ring, which is at cs.sjoy.lol. And you can find it and join it and get your own site in there too. There's also personal sites, which the URL is personalsit.es. And this is a directory of people's personal web pages. It's a great source of inspiration, and get your own site listed as well with a PR. I hope this talk has shown you that the personal site is very much not dead. It just got forgotten about somewhere in the commercialized web of today. And I think we owe it to ourselves to rediscover this somewhat lost art. And I think we can still be creators just for the sake of creating. We can still post content without somebody else profiting off it. So what are we waiting for? Build your own website. Make it fun. Make it pointless. But most importantly of all, make it yours. Thank you very much.
CSS, CSS. Whoa, hold on. I was walking across here. That felt like I don't know. It was different. It was different. It felt different. It was cool. That was awesome. You have your own personal CSS Zen garden. That was awesome.
Yeah.
I loved it. It was like you just hit a new button. Totally new experience. That was very cool.
Thank you. I'm a bit nervous about this. No.
No worries.
This is okay. Right.
There's not a whole lot of questions, so I'm going to chit-chat with you.
Yeah, I didn't think there'd be any questions, because, like, yeah.
Well, I mean, it was like a whole bunch of inspirational content. I mean, I don't want to talk about my site, but I redid my site this year, which feels like kind of, it's nerdy.dev, and I have personas on there. So, like, sometimes I'll post as a dad, sometimes I'll post as a Googler, sometimes I'll I got a really good idea today to post as the evil version of me. So I'm going to go make a new persona and be like, this is an evil post.
Nega Adam.
Yeah. Ooh, nice. Okay. Thank you for the name.
Yeah.
It's very good. One of the questions we did have, though, was, what's the best personal website everyone should visit in 2023?
Oh, my God. I feel like I've shown you some really great ones. I'm obsessed, like, with Lynn Fisher's websites, Lynn and Tonic.
Oh, totally.
Oh, my God. Like, she's so incredibly talented. She makes the most amazing things. She's a designer by trade, but yeah, her work is incredible. And she's got an archive of all of her old websites as well, which is just so much fun to browse through. So yeah, definitely recommend.
Yeah, must experience on your own computer, absolutely. Here's a curious MySpace reader, which meant they were reading all of your posts and stuff. Is green still your favorite color?
No, I'm a purple girl. Yeah, I mean, I literally had purple hair for a very long time. So yeah, I stopped like wearing so much purple after I went into a shop and someone was like, "Oh, it's the purple lady," and something inside me died that day.
Like, I do not want to be expected.
No.
You're going to be surprised at the color I choose.
Haha, I'm normal now. Just a little bit.
This is an amazing comment. At least I think so, and maybe I just oversold it. Soups, I don't know. Someone registered a new domain during your talk.
That's the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me.
Oh, good, you agree. That is so rad, right? It's like, wow.
That's insanely cool.
Your call to action worked.
You know what? I kind of hope you don't even use it, just because, like, what is more like 2023 dev than just registering domain names and not even using them? I had Sophie.pizza for a really long time just because no one had registered it. And then by the time it came up to renew, I still hadn't used it, and it got really expensive, so I had to let it lapse. But I'm just happy knowing that for a moment of time, that was mine.
That brought a lot of joy. Very cool. What is the ideal amount of time between personal website redesigns?
Oh my God, it can be like a week if you want. It's entirely up to you. I don't, like, when I was a teenager, I think it would be like every few months. Because, like, I mean, I didn't have many friends and I didn't have any hobbies apart from that. So, like, you know, that was just what we did. Be like on MSN, talking to my friends, and then just like working on my website. Yeah, I mean, for me, I don't change it that often because I actually go out the house now. But like, you might. I know, it's gross, isn't it? But like, yeah, I mean, it's entirely up to you. There's no rules.
This one's not on the list, and I'm just going to ask it anyway. What's your most embarrassing username that you ever created?
Where do I begin? I mean, OK, so my Hotmail address for a very long time was allkillerNoFiller12.
I love that album.
Yeah.
I totally never had that hairstyle.
Yeah. It was 12 because 11 other people had already registered that email address. Yeah.
Mine is Superman Man 3. There was already a Superman Man. I was like, come on, I thought I was creative. And then I had to choose the third one. I was really sad. Or no, I had one, my grandma got really mad at me. It was Adam Stud 55.
Oh, no.
And she's like, do you know what a stud is? And I was like, yeah, really cool dude at school. And then she told me what it really was, and I was like, ew.
You couldn't pay me to be a teenager ever again. It's just mortifying.
The innocence was just beautiful, wasn't it? We have one here that says, I rebuilt the entire Windows 95 desktop in CSS. Can we be friends?
Absolutely, my hero. That's amazing.
I'll just save it.
What?
Oh, I had a thought, and I was like, no, I'm going to keep that one to myself.
That's concerning.
Right? I oversold it now. You're like, what is he concealing? He's
right.
said everything on his mind so far. We have one from Josh here. It says, Sophie, I need an idea for a new personal website design. Have you got any ideas for a cool, gimmicky thing I could do?
I'm terrible at ideas. Like, this is why I don't change the design very often, because not only like am I really lazy, but also just because I don't get ideas very much. So when I do get them, I have to, like, you know, batten the hatches and put my head down and do the thing. But like, I kind of just like going out there, like how we used to do it in the olden days was going to websites and just clicking like view source and seeing how everyone had built their website. And thanks to the magic of modern browser dev tools, we can still do that in a slightly more convoluted way. So just like see what other people are doing, right? And like, I also recommend, like, okay, this advice will either be taken really well or really badly by the people concerned, but like a lot of the people who have spoken here today are really, really good at CSS. So you should go on their website and see what they've done with like new, cool, modern CSS methods, and then just copy it. But make it your own. Don't just copy it straight up.
Yeah, that can end badly. Jay had his site totally ripped. It was really sad.
Yeah, don't rip someone's website. That's not cool.
Which band had the album called Steal This Album?
Oh, Madame.
Thank you. I couldn't remember it. I keep dropping bands that are like embarrassing that I know. Actually, that band's cool. I don't care what you think. Anyway, but
no one will disagree with that.
Steal This Album. That was like kind of fun. You're like basically like, hey, go to my website and steal my album.
Someone makes Steal This website. That's basically code pen, isn't it?
Yeah.
Never mind.
I'd love to make a nice personal site, but I suck at design. I feel like this is really great for the devs who are also great at design, a personal site.
Yeah, my design is not my strong point as well. And I think, honestly, it doesn't matter. Like, I'm never going to build a website that looks like Lynn Fisher's website or Cassie's website. And
you wouldn't be happy even if you did. I mean, maybe you would actually.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah, you're right. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I'm never going to be able to do that. But that's fine because I bring other things to the table. So you know, and it's my website and it shows what I can do. And if your website looks like shit, honestly, you should be proud of it anyway because it's your shit. Y-O-U-R, not Y-O-U''re, just to be clear. But like, yeah, I just it doesn't matter if it looks like trash. Like, it's something you built. You should be proud of that.
100%. Do it for yourself, and just get started. All the layers will add in over time, and every time you touch it, it's going to become better, and you're just going to grow every time. I don't know. There's a lot of reasons to just get started. There's another one in here. I always planned to build my own website, but never built it so far. I've been planning it for 5 years, where I've helped a lot of people build their site. But
what are you doing?
Follow-up question, what's the motivation to build your own website? Wait, that was like your whole talk.
Yeah, I mean, I can do it again if you want. If you got like 40 minutes. No, I just do it. Like, if it's been 5 years, I think maybe I don't think anyone can help you at that point, really. But stop. It's like putting your oxygen mask on in a plane, right? Do your own website before you help other people do theirs.
Dang, that was fire. I'm like, do you want to stop now? That was rad. Oh. But I mean, we got more rolling in. People are stoked. Oh, I had a thing too. Hosting my own site recently, I was like, geez, the images are kicking my ass. Like,
oh yeah.
Like, sure, hosting is like cheap and stuff, but if I want to like deliver images in a way that's nice to my users and not making them download ginormous stuff, I was like, it's costly.
Yes.
That was the most frustrating thing for me recently.
Yeah, I think with those kind of things, so tiny PNG is your friend. So that will shrink the image size, optimize it as much as it can. Think, do you really need massive images? Like, the photos that we take on our phones are so huge, and that's great if you want to get them printed, but if you want to put them on your website, they really don't need to be that big. So think about whether they really need to be that big. You can add alternative formats, like WebP is much better for performance and like much smaller image size. If you use the picture tag, then you can supply alternative sources for people whose browsers don't support WebP, but that's like, I don't even know if you need to do that anymore. And yeah, just like, I think if you avoid like massive hero images, then yeah, it's probably not too bad. Like if I think a general blog post will be like, maximum like 6 images, and if you just tinify them as much as possible and make them reasonable sizes, people can always click to see a bigger version. And if you really have to use a lot of images, consider using something like a content delivery network.
Yeah, that's a really good tip. Also, I feel like Netlify does a good job not making you pay for all your images that you're serving, and they CDN your stuff for you. Yeah, excellent. We have one last question. What is the most important thing to add to a personal website?
Probably a counter of how many people have visited your website.
Yes. Very important.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, fun fact is that on the GeoCities version of my website, I have a counter that's set to like the maximum value of an integer. And someone asked me once, like, do you really have that many people visiting your website?
That was like the money you were worth on one of your pages. You were like, I'm worth
God,
this much money. And I was like,
that.
Dang, that was bold. Anyway, thank you so much. This was a really great talk, very inspiring.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Thanks, everyone.